So Richie's still dealing with the policeman and the car and so forth. I'm sitting in the back of the English ambulance, shaking like a leaf.
It is October 1988. Inside these walls, two of the most famous people on the planet are shaking, sweating, and fighting for their lives. To the world, she is frozen in amber as Agent Anya Amasova, the stunning, stoic Bond girl and the spy who loved me. Or perhaps simply the beautiful trophy wife standing next to the drummer of the Beatles. But this superficial reading ignores the darker, more visceral truth. By the late 80s, the music had stopped. The laughter had turned into a terrifying silence. And the woman standing in that white room wasn't just a supporting character in Ringo Starr's life. She was the architect of his survival, the only force strong enough to pull a rock legend back from a premature grave. But to understand how a girl from Queens became the savior of a Beatle, we must first rewind the tape to where the quiet rebellion began.
It got me a little bit annoyed in New York when it happened, because I felt people weren't being compassionate and understanding towards Richie.
The narrative begins not in the hills of Hollywood, but in the grounded, gritty reality of Rosedale, Queens. Born Barbara Bach in 1947, she was the product of a sharp cultural juxtaposition, an Irish Catholic mother and an Austrian Jewish police officer father. This was not a lineage of aristocracy, it was a foundation of discipline and pragmatism. Yet, by 1964, a fundamental anomaly occurred in the timeline of her conventional life. At the age of 16, Barbara walked away from her high school education, a decision that would typically signal a dead end. Instead, it was the catalyst for her first metamorphosis. She shortened her name to Bach and immediately signed with the prestigious Eileen Ford agency. The industry did not just accept her, it devoured her. Her face, possessing a symmetry that photographers deemed mathematically perfect, became the canvas for the era's aesthetic. She dominated the covers of 17 and Vogue, becoming one of the most commoditized images of the mid-1960s. But beneath the glossy veneer lay a profound dichotomy. Barbara was never the vacuous model archetype the media tried to construct. She possessed a piercing intellect that resented the reduction of her humanity into a visual product. While the world saw a doll, she felt the crushing weight of being an object in a system designed to exploit beauty. She was trapped in a golden cage of her own making, lucrative, glamorous, and intellectually suffocating. This friction between her internal capacity and her external perception was the root cause of the restlessness that would define her next decade. She was a woman playing a role she never auditioned for, and by 1966, the claustrophobia of New York became untenable. To escape the gilded prison of American modeling, she would have to cross an ocean and vanish into a completely different culture. In 1966, Barbara boarded a flight to Rome, ostensibly for a modeling assignment, but in reality, she was initiating a self-imposed exile. It was on this flight that she met Augusto Gregorini, an Italian businessman 11 years her senior. The attraction was immediate and decisive. Within months, the girl from Queens had dissolved her American identity, married Gregorini, and relocated permanently to Italy. This was not merely a change of address, it was a total cultural assimilation. She learned the language, adopted the customs, and stepped into a life of domestic anonymity. However, the architecture of fate is rarely linear. While walking the streets of Rome, Barbara was spotted by producers who saw in her the ideal aesthetic for the booming Italian cinema industry. Despite her husband's preference for privacy, a foreshadowing of the tensions that would later plague her personal life, she was pulled into the orbit of Cinecittà. This period marks a fascinating anomaly in her filmography. She didn't start in Hollywood rom-coms. She cut her teeth in the gritty, avant-garde world of 1970s Italian cinema. She appeared in giallo thrillers like Black Belly of the Tarantula, 1971, and starred as Nazca in the highly acclaimed miniseries L'Odissea, The Odyssey, 1968. She became a European star, dubbed in Italian, detached from the American machine. The industry in Los Angeles began to view her not as an American expat, but as a sophisticated European import. This unintentional fabrication of her identity created an aura of mystery that domestic actresses couldn't replicate. She was foreign, aloof, and untraceable. But by 1975, the marriage to Gregorini crumbled under the weight of divergent paths, forcing Barbara to return to the United States. She arrived in Los Angeles not as a rookie, but as a seasoned veteran of European cinema, carrying a foreign mystique that would soon catch the eye of the biggest franchise in film history. But Hollywood, as she was about to discover, had no interest in her acting range. They only wanted the aesthetic. In 1977, Barbara stepped into the center of a cultural monolith. She was cast as Major Anya Amasova in The Spy Who Loved Me, widely considered one of the finest entries in the James Bond canon. On the surface, this was the pinnacle of success. To be a Bond girl is to be immortalized in the pop culture lexicon. However, for a woman of Barbara's psychological complexity, it was less a victory and more a gilded cage. The character of Amasova was written as Bond's equal, a Soviet major with the same rank and lethality as 007. Yet, the Hollywood marketing machine flattened her into a two-dimensional sex symbol. The press obsession focused entirely on her physicality, ignoring the nuance she brought to the screen. This created a jarring cognitive dissonance. Barbara was an intelligent, independent woman playing a strong character, yet she was being sold to the masses as mere eye candy. It is here that we see the first cracks in the facade. In a move that shocked the producers and the press, Barbara refused to play the grateful starlet. In a now infamous interview, she publicly described James Bond as a male chauvinist pig who used women like bullets to protect himself. This was a radical statement in 1977. She was biting the hand that fed her, exposing the misogynistic underbelly of the franchise that was making her a household name. Despite her defiance, the industry typecast her immediately. She was trapped in the glamour algorithm, offered role after role that required her to look beautiful and say little. The professional dissatisfaction was palpable. She had conquered the modeling world and the film world, yet she felt entirely hollow. She needed an escape from the superficiality of Los Angeles. And she would find it in the most unlikely of places. A prehistoric comedy set in Mexico, where another lost soul was waiting. The year was 1980. The location was the blistering, dusty plains of Durango, Mexico. The project was Caveman, a slapstick prehistoric comedy that film historians have largely forgotten. Yet, in the grand narrative of music history, this set was the site of a seismic convergence. It was here that the trajectory of Barbara Bach intersected with the drifting orbit of Richard Starkey, known to the world as Ringo Starr. At this precise moment in time, both individuals were standing on a precipice. Ringo was a decade removed from the breakup of the Beatles, wandering through a haze of high-profile parties and professional aimlessness. He was a king without a kingdom, beloved by millions, but intimately isolated. Barbara, conversely, was disillusioned by the hollow promises of Hollywood stardom. They were two refugees from the machinery of fame, both weary of the characters they were forced to play in public. The connection was not instantaneous fireworks, it was a profound recognition of shared damage. Ringo later described it as an immediate sense that they had met before. This was not the superficial attraction of a rock star and a model, it was a psychological locking of gears. Within days of filming, the Bond girl and the Beatle dissolved. What remained were simply Richie and Barbara, two people desperate for an authentic human connection in an industry built on artificiality. However, this union created a dangerous new equilibrium. They were wealthy, idle, and insulated from reality by a phalanx of assistants and yes-men. When two people with addictive personalities find solace in one another, the relationship can quickly mutate from a sanctuary into a fortress. They had found love, yes, but they had also found the perfect partner for a descent into oblivion. As the filming wrapped and they returned to London and Los Angeles, the lights went down and the party began. A party that would not stop for nearly a decade. The catalyst had been triggered. The slide into the abyss was about to begin. The 1980s for Ringo and Barbara were not defined by albums or movies, but by a hermetically sealed existence within the walls of Tittenhurst Park, the sprawling English estate Ringo had purchased from John Lennon. This period, which Ringo chillingly refers to as the years I lost, was a descent into a high-functioning, luxurious oblivion. The mansion became a fortress against reality. The curtains were perpetually drawn, obliterating the concept of day and night. The couple existed in a closed loop of consumption, brandy in the morning, cocaine in the afternoon, and wine into the endless night. This was not the hedonism of a rock and roll tour. It was a static, domestic decay. They were, in the most literal sense, enabling each other to death. The staff was paid to be invisible, the friends were often fellow users, and the money ensured that no consequences could breach the perimeter. In this vacuum, Barbara Bach ceased to be the vibrant actress of the 70s. She became a prisoner of the addiction she shared with her husband. The tragedy was systemic. Because they were Ringo and Barbara, the world viewed their behavior as eccentric celebrity antics rather than a medical emergency. They were insulated by their legend. There was no one with the authority to tell a Beatle no. The climax of this slow-motion suicide occurred in late 1988. Following a blackout session of extreme intoxication, Ringo regained consciousness to find his home trashed. Violent destruction surrounded him. But the true horror lay in what he saw next. Barbara, battered and bloody. In his blackout rage, he had lost all control. The terrifying realization washed over him. He didn't know if he had beaten her or if he had killed her. Though she survived, the illusion of the happy party couple was shattered. The violence of that morning pierced the fog of their addiction. Ringo stood amidst the wreckage of his home and his marriage, faced with a binary choice: seek help or die. The feedback loop had finally collapsed. But admitting the problem was only the first step. The real challenge was whether a system built on indulgence could tolerate the rigor of recovery. To understand why this descent lasted nearly a decade, we must look beyond personal willpower and examine the structural psychology of fame. As detailed by biographer Michael Seth Starr in his exhaustive work, Ringo with a Little Help, 2015, the life of a Beatle is defined by a distinct sociological phenomenon, the insularity of the icon. Starr argues that Ringo existed in a curated reality where his whims were commands. For 30 years, he had been surrounded by an ecosystem of managers, assistants, and sycophants whose economic survival depended on keeping the star happy. In this environment, addiction is reframed as lifestyle. There is no external friction, no dissenting voice, and consequently, no reality check. The system is designed to enable, not to correct. This is where the concept of codependent enabling becomes critical. Usually, the enabler is the sober partner protecting the addict, but in the case of Ringo and Barbara, the dynamic was far more lethal. They were symbiotic users. They validated each other's delusion. As long as Barbara was drinking, Ringo felt justified. As long as Ringo was using, Barbara felt normal. They were locked in a binary star system, spiraling inward. However, the paradox lies in who finally broke the cycle. In the standard celebrity narrative, it is the management or the suits who force an intervention to protect the asset. Here, the system failed. The management was complicit. The intervention had to come from inside the addiction. Barbara Bach became the anomaly in the dataset. Despite her own dependency, she retained a fragment of that Queens-born pragmatism, a survival instinct that the Beatle bubble had eroded in Ringo. She realized that the yes-men would watch them die rather than risk their salaries. She understood that if they were to survive, they had to shatter the ecosystem entirely. She wasn't just saving a husband, she was dismantling the machinery that had kept him compliant and comatose for years. The realization was stark. The only way out of the fortress was to walk out the front door together and surrender to total strangers. In October 1988, the couple made a decision that was unprecedented in the world of high celebrity rehabilitation. They checked into the Sierra Tucson Clinic in Arizona together. This was a logistical and psychological gamble. Addiction specialists generally advise against couples entering rehab simultaneously, as the codependency often sabotages the individual recovery. Yet, Barbara and Ringo insisted. They had descended into the hellscape as a unit, and they would either climb out as a unit or not at all. The intake process stripped them of their armor. For the first time in decades, Ringo Starr was not the drummer. He was just Richard, a middle-aged alcoholic. Barbara was not the Bond girl. She was Barbara, a woman fighting for her life. The clinic's methodology was brutal and egalitarian. There were no VIP suites, no personal assistants, and no deferential treatment. They were forced to scrub floors, attend group therapy with strangers, and confront the trauma they had been anesthetizing for years. The pivotal moment came when the doctors confronted Ringo with the stark medical reality. His liver was failing. He was not partying too hard, he was actively dying. At the same time, Barbara had to confront her own identity, stripped of the glamour and the substances. It was a 4-week crucible of raw, unfiltered reality. But the turning point wasn't the detox itself, it was the surrender. For a man who had been treated as a deity since 1963, the act of admitting "I am powerless" was a metaphysical shock. And right beside him, refusing to let him retreat into his ego, was Barbara. She was the anchor. When he wanted to leave, she stayed. When he faltered, she held the line. They emerged from Sierra Tucson not cured, addiction has no cure, but fundamentally rewired. They had broken the feedback loop. They returned to a world that expected them to fail, armed with nothing but a new fragility and a terrifying clarity. The party was over. The real work of living was about to begin. The years following 1988 represent the most remarkable divergence in the narrative. In the standard script of rock and roll, the sober years are often portrayed as a dull epilogue of fading away. For Barbara Bach, however, it was a renaissance. She did not return to the sound stages of Hollywood. She understood that the industry which had objectified her was incompatible with the authenticity she had found in recovery. In a move that baffled her agents but saved her soul, she walked away from the camera for good. She enrolled at UCLA not as a celebrity auditor, but as a dedicated student, eventually earning a master's degree in psychology in 1993. This was the ultimate reclamation of agency. The woman who had been silenced by the label of Bond girl spent the next decade studying the human mind, equipping herself with the intellectual tools to understand the very addiction that had nearly destroyed her. She didn't just survive the fire, she learned how to extinguish it for others. Alongside Ringo, she founded the Lotus Foundation and championed the self-help addiction recovery program, SHARP. She transformed her trauma into a methodology for healing. The contrast with their peers is haunting. The history of rock music is littered with the corpses of power couples who fueled each other's destruction. Sid and Mancy, Kurt and Courtney, Jim Morrison and Pamela Courson. Ringo and Barbara are the statistical anomaly. They are the survivors who refuse to become a tragedy porn headline. Today, when you see Ringo Starr flashing peace signs, looking decades younger than his age, vibrant and healthy, you are not looking at a stroke of genetic luck. You are looking at the handiwork of Barbara Bach. She became the silent architect of his longevity, creating a domestic sanctuary where the Beatle could finally just be a man. She traded the adoration of millions for the sanity of one. And in doing so, she secured a legacy far greater than any film credit. In the final analysis, the story of Barbara Bach forces us to reevaluate the mythology of the rock star muse. History is littered with women who were consumed by the blazing gravity of male genius. Figures like Anita Pallenberg or Pamela Courson, who are remembered often as casualties or accessories to the art. The industry expects the woman standing next to the legend to be a passive witness to the excess or a tragic victim of it. Barbara Bach rejected both archetypes. She refused to be the tragic ending. Her legacy is not defined by the celluloid frames of a 007 film, nor by the glossy magazine covers of the 1960s. Those were merely the costumes of a life lived in public. Her true magnum opus was the quiet, invisible labor of reconstruction performed in the private shadows of 1988. She dismantled the enabling machinery that surrounds a global icon and replaced it with a foundation of brutal honesty. There is a profound paradox here. The world celebrates Ringo Starr as the man who provides the peace and love, but we must ask, who provides the peace for the provider? The answer has been standing quietly beside him for 40 years. Barbara Bach proved that the most difficult role in Hollywood isn't playing a spy or a queen. It is the act of being human in a world designed to turn you into a product. She saved the drummer, yes, but more importantly, she saved herself. And in doing so, she reminds us that sometimes the most heroic act is simply the refusal to let the lights go out.